Hey everybody, I am here in Hereford, England, after having spent a few days in London and a day in Cambridge. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what the experience has been like over here. As sort of an American, being outside of America, I have to be completely honest with you, it's a bit of a relief. Feels more relaxed, less stressful. Definitely like the onslaught of news isn't reaching me with the same intensity and velocity at which it seems to come at us at home. Also, people over here have a really good perspective on what's happening in a way I think Americans don't have a perspective on what's happening elsewhere in the world, even though as a country of great power and influence, what we do has an impact on the rest of the world. So one thing I noticed right away, as you can imagine, is that the economy, the American economy is bad in ways that we don't recognize when we're in America. So we know that the tariff insanity is creating all sorts of problems in terms of rising prices. We know that it's going to be creating serious supply chain issues. What I was not aware of, and I mean this is my bad, I should have known this before I came over here, is just how incredibly weak the dollar is. And what does that mean? That means that everything we buy in the UK is much more expensive than it would otherwise have been. I used to travel to Europe and the UK fairly frequently, but it's been a long time actually, since, with one exception, since I've been over here. And the last time the dollar was very strong and the exchange rate was incredibly good, so things were much cheaper for Americans buying goods in European countries and the UK. So I was a bit shocked to realize the opposite is the case. For example, something that would cost £10, £10, actually translated to about $17. That is horrific. Multiply that by 10. And things like hotels and train tickets really add up. And it's something I wasn't expecting. I suppose I should have thought about it, but it's never been a problem. I think the last time it would have been is back in 2008 when the bottom fell out of our economy thanks to the Bush administration. But that was a very complicated problem that had been years in the making. This time around, it's literally because Donald is so destructive and ignorant about all things economic. All of this could be laid at his feet, quite frankly. And it's just another way in which Americans are paying the price for his inability to course correct and recognize the devastation his, quite frankly, grotesquely wrong-headed policies are creating. So, that's been the most obvious day-to-day impact that I've noticed over here. And in addition to that, I've been talking to people about, what do they think about what's going on? And a lot of people have been making the connections between what we're experiencing now and what many people here are continuing to experience because of Brexit. For example, I was speaking to one of the concierges at my hotel, and he was saying that it is very, very difficult to send goods over to Europe from the UK. For example, he mentioned that many Middle Eastern tourists are going to Europe now because it doesn't make sense anymore to buy things here, to come to England for a shopping trip, for example, because it's so difficult and expensive to ship goods out of the UK. So in the past, hotels, if you came to London and you bought some souvenirs and what have you, and you didn't have room in your luggage to bring them home with you, you'd ship them, and you could take them to the front desk of the hotel, and they'd pack everything up for you and just send it by post. Now it requires filling out multiple forms, and the hoops one has to jump through are so numerous that it just doesn't make any sense. So, one, either tourists aren't coming in the same numbers they used to, or when they do come, they're not buying as much as they used to because it just doesn't make sense for them. So it's just an example of how the US and the UK are facing similar issues because of certain policies that have been put in place by their governments. Now, things aren't as bad here as they are at home, that's true. However, they do seem to be going down a very similar road, and for very similar reasons. Okay, on the one hand, Elon Musk has inserted himself into recent elections over here, and it actually was effective. The Reform Party, which is sort of a right-wing, it's a parliamentary system, so there are a lot of different parties over here, but the Reform Party, I guess, would be similar to today's Republican Party in the States. And perhaps not surprisingly, the person leading the reform movement is the execrable Nigel Farage, who has made a resurgence in part due to Elon Musk's meddling and money. And the Reform Party did very, very well in the most recent UK elections, which should send a chill down all of our spines. Because, the reform movement and the MAGA movement are quite aligned ideologically. And the other thing that, say, Farage has in common with Donald is he's a faux populist who presents himself as a man of the people, and for various reasons seems to have his fingers on the pulse of what people who should not be voting for the party, the Reform Party, or should not be voting for the Republican Party, they are convinced that whether it's the Reform or the Republican Party are parties that best represent the interest of working people and the middle class, which of course is not true. Farage and people like him, just like Donald, are making a fortune based on their ability to delude people into voting against their own economic self-interest. And it's quite something to see a similar situation being replicated over here. I mean, again, things aren't quite as far gone, but I was speaking to some people this morning who said, and one of whom actually is in the House of Lords, so she knows of what she speaks, said that she would not be surprised to see Nigel Farage, an extremist right-wing figure leading the Reform Party, as the United Kingdom's next Prime Minister. So I wish us all luck, and I will be checking in with you soon. Bye.